Now, enough of this fictitious journeying into the seeking apparent God world. And let's take a look at some real people, meaning living forms that have been experienced and are still being experienced through technology and ways of recording and reproducing. I want to talk about a man, a wise man, that I would like to call a guru. That was a guru for me, a master, to this ego mind, this human mind, where it sorted this ego mind out and made it quite clear. It was always being teased into the wrong direction. And this man is U.G. Krishnamurti, a very, very misinterpreted man. Because he disassociated with the spiritual side, with the consciousness and the non-duality and all that stuff, and focused completely on the ego, he was not accepted for that. But what he did was very brave. Rather than taking the side of spirituality and opposing ego, meaning turning its back on ego, which most that have experienced this shock do, they find some other way of pacifying, like the speaker did, of this beautiful, incredible nothingness, this emptiness. UG still managed to speak about this nothingness, this no one is talking, there is nothing taking place, which is very, very similar to Ramana Maharshi. To deny anything that is spoken that does not involve the actuality of the form being alive and nothing else. Sometimes speakers like Ramana Maharshi, they use words like consciousness and who am I and all that this speaker also, and Eckhart Tolle and Mooji and Papaji and Ramana and Jashanti, Gangaji, Rupert Spira, all these Sheldrake and all, all use this terminology. But what they're using the terminology for is to take the mind off of this ego. So to take your mind off of ego does not really remove the ego. The only way you can remove ego is to confront it. If you have two armies and one wants to remove the other, the only way they can do it is through annihilation. When an army turns its back, both armies turn their back. They move away from the war and the fighting, but they still coexist. So we have this idea that we either coexist and completely deny anything that goes on except what we are to ourselves, or we confront that what is destructive. U.G. Krishnamurti confronted the ego and was despised because he was a thorn, a nuisance, like Christ was to these Jewish priests, a thorn in their side. He confronted the idea of wealth and power and success. He confronted them. Therefore, he was annihilated. So what to do? Whose side to take? There is only one way that this speaker sees it. And it's not the right way or the wrong way. It is just another way, another method. It's to ignore that armies exist. To ignore that sides exist. To ignore that anything exists other than life. And life has no values, no measurements, no differing qualities, no preferential attributes, no comparisons. Therefore, you become non-judgmental towards anything that is life. You look from that witnessing point of life looking at life. You're not anything outside of this life. You're not anything inside of this life. This life has no inner or outer positions. Therefore, you have to avoid all speakers that take sides. Meaning, avoid the world, because each one of us speaks with a different tongue. Each one of us speaks about some confronting the enemy. The other ones speak about turning away from the enemy. Some speak about negotiating with the enemy. Some speak about accepting the enemy over there, but watching it and making sure it doesn't break the rules and the guidelines that both enemies have set out for each other. I sees no enemies. There's no one here willing to fight, wanting to fight, looking for anything other than being alive. But I speak on behalf of that what we truly are, and not about this mind and this body, which cannot be exempt from these methods, these ways. Because if this I speaks about these ways, this I believes that these ways exist. To simply raise the point that there are two enemies gives life to these two enemies. So therefore, in silence, each one of us does not see anything, realizes that words are meek and meager and cause distortion, confrontation, gives reason to in accepting and comparing, gives values and analysis and judgment to the words that each one uses in their own way through their own conditioned upbringing and inherited informative educational system. So it appears like it's a no-win situation. The mind is always active and looking for ways in and looking for ways out. We are free. The true ones that reside in this body is free, completely free. In fact, it's so free that we are stretched infinitely, limitlessly through to the ends or to the boundaries or to the transcendence into this universal galaxies and cosmos. But the mind and the body appears bound. It appears to be secluded, segregated, put into places, to positions, to wait for the war that is about to come. This war is the war with you and your mind. This war is the war with the body and the mind. This war is when the body and the mind face up to each other, and sometimes the mind wins and eradicates the body, and the mind moves away to haunt some other body. Sometimes the body wins. But there's always going to be a confrontation. There's always going to be a facing up. There's always going to be that mirror eye saying, what the hell is going on here? What is the problem? That we cannot simply merge as one. Meaning the mind and the body, not you and another body. That is the war. The war is that we cannot be here in the state that we are born, in the state that we are conditioned, in the state that we are educated into, and be equal. We're all going to be unique, uniquely programmed, uniquely organized and constructed, not by some Illuminati or conspiracy group, just by that need and desire to want something other than what we are. Simple breath. simple form, simple flesh. But we are not happy with that. The mind wants more. It wants land. It wants power. It wants greatness. It wants division. It wants to look down. It wants slaves. It wants to be a slave. It wants to be different. It wants to be unique. It wants to be unique, and then it wants to be equal. It wants to be one. It cannot cope. It moves around like that swirling Sufi, circulating itself. The idea, what is the idea behind this? There is no way out and no way in. There is that what is taking place. With a non-recognition of me being something, watching something taking place. I am the taking place. All is the taking place of that what is taking place. UG says nothing is happening. Of course nothing is happening. Everything is happening, but nothing is happening while the mind is not at home. The mind is not pertinent to that what is happening. The mind is not telling stories about that what is happening. The mind is not making guesswork and assumptions and plans about what is happening. The mind is not trying to control what is happening. Everything is happening when the mind is present. Everything is moving when the mind is not present. But the mind makes a story, so therefore it has a happening experience. I went and walked towards the car. The body itself and the car were always going to meet. But something had to tell the story. Something had to be programmed and ingrained to say, I went to tell the car. So therefore, when you're in court for some charges for someone, then you become the witness. You can recite that story so that they can imprison the one that was guilty of that offense and therefore put it in behind bars and bind it away from the world to control that peace that is originally here. But we have lost this peace through wanting to create peace, wanting a perfect world, a perfect all the same oneness. How can a 95-year-old woman think the same as a 5-year-old boy or a 40-year-old boy, man? Time has created distortion. Time has created generations. Time has created knowledge, information, and time kills us, whether we like it or not. Find the timeless. Find the way is neither in nor out. The way is. I and consciousness are all that exist. No human living form or non-living form is saying anything else other than that. And when each one says it at the same time, a big echo appears as if we're all one. It's a thought that creates division. It's a thought that creates God. It's the removal of these thoughts that create peace, as it is.